Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Mike Weinman, and I am here today to give opposition testimony in House Bill 487. On behalf of the Fraternal Order of Police of Ohio, a retired Columbus police officer who now serves as the Director of Government Affairs for the Fraternal Order of Police, I am proud to represent 26,000 full-time and retired law enforcement professionals who risk their lives on a daily basis protecting our community. Today I would like to give testimony on two provisions of House Bill 487 has been assigned to this committee. First, I would like to address a proposed change to Ohio law that would allow the State Highway Patrol the authority over crimes committed on private property, and second, a theft of $23 million a year. During the most recent budget debate, the FOP weighed in and gave testimony opposing the sale of the state prisons. One of the problems we spoke of was the shift from the Highway Patrol to local authorities in the investigation of crimes on what would become private property. Controversy now swirls around the former Lake Erie Correctional Institute. The City of Coney Island is arguing it cannot take on the additional law enforcement duties at the facility. The sheriff, as you heard, has indicated that he can take on those duties, but a flawed, poorly researched and written Attorney General opinion leaves the Highway Patrol in charge. Now, under House Bill 487, there is an attempt to put this opinion into law. The FOP adamantly opposes this language. The language is so vague one can easily interpret it to mean that wherever there is a DRC prisoner housed, the Highway Patrol has enforcement authority. As President Hackett mentioned, with the crack in the window, the water will rush in. And one of the problems when I was with Columbus that we ran into was the Highway Patrol assumed jurisdiction over halfway houses. And anytime someone didn't show up at the halfway house, the patrol was doing a missing report and doing that investigation. They were then on the streets of Columbus and residential areas looking for this person who was checked in at the halfway house. This prison in Coney Island is a medium security prison. And when we talk about response times and that sort of thing, this is a captive audience. When they commit a crime, they're not going anywhere. You can secure crime scenes. So it wouldn't be very hard for the sheriff to do those 9 investigations that went to the grand jury. Under House Bill 487, ORC Section 109.802, the Law Enforcement Assistance Fund is eliminated, and ORC Section 109.803, continuing professional training for peace officers and troopers, is severely amended. I attached the section that they're repealing so that you can take a look at it and see what's going to be missing if this proposal goes forward. In the 126th General Assembly, then Senator, now Congressman Steve Cybers, worked with the FOP to establish continued professional training for peace officers and troopers and created a reimbursement process to offset the costs of local government. The law had a requirement that monies which would have to be available in the law enforcement training fund in order for the training to be conducted. There was initial state money placed in the fund 1 year. In 1 year, the Attorney General, then Attorney General Mark Dan, took $3 million of his own funds from his office and put it in that law enforcement training fund. When the state constitution was amended to allow for the casinos, a provision was added to allocate 2% of the tax on gross casino revenue to be placed in the state law enforcement training fund. This fund is to be used for additional training for law enforcement professionals. Now, the casino money has been hijacked, and we are faced with an unfunded mandatory 4-hour training requirement. When the FOP endorsed and campaigned for the 4 casinos, we did so with the knowledge that a projected $20 to $23 million a year would go toward continuing education for our members. After all, the constitutional amendment said additional training. This money is now being diverted into 2 new funds, the Peace Officer Training Academy Fund and the Criminal Justice Services Casino Tax Revenue Fund. And I've attached the constitutional amendment, the language that appears in the Constitution. I think it's like Section F under 6. So you can read it yourself where it addresses additional money, additional training. This money, it says in line 75,842 through 75,848 that the funds are for the purpose of supporting law enforcement training efforts. What it says is for the furtherance of law enforcement training. Who's law enforcement training? That's the question. Whose law enforcement training is it to be for the furtherance of? Under 109.802, 109.803, every law enforcement officer and trooper in the state had to receive the training. With the reimbursement language being deleted, our local governments seem very unlikely to ever see the casino training fund money. It is these local governments that have been slashing or outright eliminating officer training funds. Ohio Municipal League Executive Director Sue Cave has already spoken of the importance of continued training and its ability to drive down costs for government. Is this creation of these new funds simply a ploy to replace GRF money with the casino money for the benefit of the AG's office and the Department of Public Safety? Surely it doesn't cost $23 million, and we heard that it doesn't cost $23 million to put on an online training course. We heard that it costs $80,000. So the question is, where does the other, I did the math, $22,920,000 go? A vote to use this money to supplant the GRF funding for the AG or ODPS is a direct attack on the voters of Ohio who passed this constitutional amendment. The intent was clear. Everyone knew that this money was intended for additional training for Ohio's law enforcement officers. One 4-hour class for $23 million does not pass the smell test. This was really offensive to the voters and the law enforcement professionals who protect them. The FOP is respectfully requesting the reenactment of ORC Section 109.802 and the sections of ORC Section 109.803 that have been eliminated, and that the 2% tax on casino revenues be placed in the Law Enforcement Assistance Fund, where the casino monies will be used for their intended purpose of continuing officer education and training. We spoke briefly about the training, this online training. Online training is fine to a point, but I'm not going to learn how to do ground defense tactics, how to properly handcuff anyone without hands-on training. This goes to what Representative Reese was speaking to last week about the training that Cincinnati does. They do training, and she was asking why do we have to do this additional 4 hours of training. Well, when this program first came out, when I was with Columbus, what we did was 4 hours of mandatory training that was required by the OPTC. And anything above that, the City of Columbus would get reimbursed if they submitted lesson plans on what the training would be. So then Attorney General Mark Hand said, we've got X amount of dollars, you can do 16 hours of training. So we did 4 hours of training. Then Columbus Police did extra training with the approval of those lesson plans. So, everyone in Columbus Division of Police got 16 hours of training, additional training. And as any of you know, that have been in the military or lawyers and things like that, this continuing training keeps you sharp. I may have learned how to do handcuffing techniques. I may be doing handcuffing for 20 years. But maybe there's a new way of doing it that makes myself and the suspect safer, a way of doing those things. To go on, to conclude, we oppose this change for the Highway Patrol's authority. We'd like to see that language stricken from the bill. And with that, I'd like to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Weinman. Are there questions? Representative Booth.
I think this will be a very simple question. we've been told by the governor's office, we came up with this bill. This is the governor's bill that was passed on to us, that these issues have been thoroughly vetted. He has spoken to, he told us he has spoken to all the different associations or whatever. Was this issue that you're talking about now discussed with you, the FOP, in any means, or did it just kind of show up and now you see it kind of thing? Or was there some kind of discussion between you or any of the policing groups with the governor's office?
Chairman Blair, Representative, we found out about this when the bill was introduced, the shifting fund. No one approached the FOP. We were quite surprised with the shifting fund. Rather distressed by it, actually, that we weren't approached by the Attorney General's office and the administration. That's why we're asking for, this language change. Otherwise, we would have worked this out beforehand and would have been able to address this before bringing it before you.
Just a comment. Go ahead. I completely understand. I would be frustrated as well. I mean, it's a major change. We're talking $23 million, right, of some sort. And I would hope that maybe we could get this worked out so that more discussions had, vetted, without just making changes without discussing. So, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, sir.
Do you have any further questions? Representative Reese, did you hear your name mentioned by the witness before you came in?
I did not. I was coming from finance.
He did. He spoke very highly.
So thank you. I appreciate that. With that, I do have a question because I need actually some help down in my district down in Cincinnati. We're going through a situation where we have for the first time, our police chief coming from the outside, and it's something that the voters of Cincinnati voted for and wanted. And one of the issues is that some of our training does not have anything in the books for executive level police chief who served in, I think, 3 or 4 other states and never experienced what we have here. So as we're looking at changing the issue of training, is there any room for an executive level type training that would, I think be more appropriate for someone at his level and probably others in the future as we, start to recruit people into the state? And do you think that would, I'm looking at an amendment regarding that, because right now there's nothing on the books that would help with that situation.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Reese, we haven't formed a position on that issue. I can see it both ways. When I was in the Air Force, I thought my training, I was a law enforcement specialist in the Air Force before they got rid of it. It was the greatest in the world until I got to Columbus. And I realized I had 5 extra months of training. I only had a month in the Air Force of training as a law enforcement specialist. When I got to Columbus, it was 6.5 months. And I realized rather quickly that training wasn't really that adequate to take on crack dealers in inner city Columbus. But with that said, I was a new officer coming on. With the executive level, I would hope that we would at least get folks up to speed on how Ohio does things, case law and that sort of thing. It is nice to have, when you join Columbus too, no matter if you have training from Worthington or wherever, you have to go through the Columbus Police Academy to make sure everyone's on the same page. So I would think that there would be some sort of tactical and strategic things that a new executive coming in would have to understand about his people that he'll be directing.
You want to follow?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. My question is it true, but I'm not sure if it is true, but I heard that those who came in 1989 and before were grandfathered in, so they weren't subject to the training that we're requiring now. Is that true? And if so, I guess my question, I thought it was a little strange to see my police chief of the 3rd largest city in the state of Ohio sitting in an entry-level class with recruits. I thought it would be a little tough for him to be kind of over. We didn't have anything that kind of fit, I thought, the executive level. But is it true that in 1989 we didn't have that? They were grandfathered in? Or?
I'm not, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'm not familiar with that. I was a junior in high school. So,
And I was a senior, so watch this.
So, I'm sure it's a very, it would be, I would say a pride thing, you know, to have to take orders from someone who's junior from you in a training environment, but I don't know how to answer that question, sorry.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll let you see the amendment. I'd love to get your input on it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Seeing none, just want to thank you very much.